I was driving home late one night. The kind of late where the radio station switched to static and the road seems to stretch on forever. The highway was nearly empty save for the occasional semi-truck that rumbled past, headlights slicing through the darkness. It had been a long day at work, and the monotony of the drive started to weigh on me. The rain didn't help. It was heavy, but a steady drizzle that turned the pavement into a black mirror. My wipers squeaked in rhythm, trying to keep the windshield clear. Then I saw her. She was standing on the shoulder of the road, a woman in a white dress. Her hair was long and tangled, sticking to her face in the rain. She wasn't waving, wasn't trying to flag me down, just standing there, staring at the passing cars with an intensity that made my stomach twist. For a second, I debated stopping. It was late, she looked drenched, and part of me thought maybe she had car trouble or something. But something about her posture, too still, too stiff, kept my foot on the gas. I drove on, but the image of her stuck with me. 10 minutes passed, maybe 15. I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. That's when I saw her again. Same woman, same dress, same spot on the shoulder of the road. My heart slammed against my ribs. That didn't make sense. I hadn't seen any cars pass me, and there were no turnarounds on the stretch of highway. It was as if she teleported ahead. I told myself I was imagining things, that it was just someone else who looked similar. Still, I sped up, the rain blurring the world outside into streaks of gray. But then I saw her a third time. This time she was closer to the road. Her face was pale, unnaturally pale, and her eyes, they locked onto mine as I passed. A chill shot through me, and my hands tightened on the wheel. I didn't dare look in the rearview mirror. The minutes dragged by and the rain grew heavier. My headlights barely cut through the gloom now. I leaned forward, trying to peer through the downpour, when something caught my eye. It was in the back seat. At first I thought it was just a shadow, a trick of the dim light and rain, but as I glanced in the mirror again, my blood ran cold. She was sitting there, the woman in white soaked to the bone, her hair dripping onto the upholstery. Her face was turned towards me, her lips unmoving, but her eyes, those wide, empty eyes, were fixed on mine through the mirror. I screamed and jerked the wheel, the car swerving dangerously on the wet road. When I looked back, she was gone. Heart pounding, I pulled over to the side of the road, my breaths coming in ragged gasps. I sat there for a long time, the rain hammering against the roof of the car. Eventually, I worked up the courage to check the back seat. It was empty, of course, but the seatbelt was wet, as if someone had been sitting there. I didn't drive home that night. Instead, I parked at a gas station and sat under the fluorescent lights until dawn. I still drive that highway sometimes, but I never take it at night anymore. I'm afraid she'll be there, waiting for me to pass again. And this time, she might not leave. My friend and I were spending some time at a festival in a small town in the mountains of Washington. We heard from locals that there was a place called Sunset Peak, where you could only access through forest roads. We decided to take a chance and made our way up the mountain. We drove for hours but could not find the right place. There was no GPS or cell service, and we got lost on the forest roads. Eventually, we found a space on the mountain that had enough clearance to see the sunset and enjoyed the last few moments of the purple and orange sky before the sun dipped fully below the mountain peaks. We decided to leave soon after and started our drive down the mountain. We had the windows down because the air was warm and smelled of pine. We talked about our plans for the rest of our trip and what was in the festival schedule for the next day. That's when I heard the rumble of a two-stroke motor from outside my window. I didn't think anything of it. We are in the woods after all, and someone might have an agreement with the county to clear the roads of fallen pines. We carried on our conversation and stopped when we both heard the same sounds again. The direction of the sounds didn't make sense. It was coming from behind us. I rolled up our windows to just a crack, and we stayed silent for a while, listening for any more sounds. The darkness of night had fully fallen, and without light pollution, the only light we had was the headlights in front of us. Again, we heard the sound. It sounded like a chainsaw, but it was following us. I checked the rearview mirror, but saw nothing. I kept my foot on the gas and drove us down the mountain as quickly as I could safely do. Finally, we saw some lights in front of us, but it wasn't the town. It was spotlights on the back of a truck shining brightly on a man. The man had no shirt, ripped pants, a light on his hat, and a chainsaw in his hands. He stopped and stared at us as we quickly swerved around him and his truck, trying to move as quickly as we could while also driving off the dirt road and into the brush to get around. We were scared of the man, but I thought to myself that I had been right, and the man with no shirt must have been the sound of the motor we heard before, and he was clearing trees which had fallen onto the forest roads. My heart beat in my chest as I looked behind me to make sure he wasn't following us. We started to breathe a sigh of relief when we heard the sound of a two-stroke motor behind us. Shit, I thought. The man with the chainsaw was following us down this damn mountain, and we were going to get murdered by him. I once again rolled up the windows and made sure the doors were locked. The sound of the motor got louder and louder, drowning out the hum of the car's engine. Suddenly, the sounds of the motor were right on top of us, and out of the right side of the car I saw something loud and dark come up to the passenger side, slow down, and then speed up out of sight. I could hear my heart in my ears as I struggled to keep my breath. Something, maybe a dirt bike, had been following us down the mountain and past the man with the chainsaw. But luckily for us, we weren't his victim that day. It was supposed to be a short drive. I'd been visiting family for the weekend, a quick trip to reconnect, to catch up. The drive back home should have been a simple one, just a few hours, the kind of drive that didn't require much thought. I'd been on this stretch of road 1,000 times before, same route, same highway. But tonight, for some reason, everything felt off. It was nearly midnight when I left my parents' house. The air was crisp, a hint of autumn in the wind as I rolled the windows down a bit. There was hardly any traffic on the highway, which made it all the more peaceful. I like driving alone at night. It gives me time to think, to clear my head. I turned on the radio, letting the low hum of music fill the car as the headlights cut through the dark. As I passed the last sign for the small town, I knew I had about an hour and a half left to go. My eyes were heavy. The kind of tiredness you get after spending an entire weekend with your family, catching up and telling stories. My mind wandered to everything I had to do when I got home. Work, cleaning, laundry, and that's when it started. At first, I thought it was my eyes playing tricks on me. I'd glance in the rearview mirror and see headlights. Just a car behind me, nothing out of the ordinary. But after a few minutes, I noticed something. The car's headlights weren't getting any closer. They stayed exactly where they were, distant and out of focus. I checked the mirror again. Same car, still there. I didn't think much at first. Maybe they were driving at the same speed, or maybe it was a truck with high beams. I shook my head, trying to focus on the road ahead. But there was something about the light in the rear view that felt wrong. It wasn't the normal glow of headlights. It was too bright, too steady. I increased my speed, thinking maybe I'd lost the car behind me, but the headlights didn't fade. They stayed right there. I glanced in the mirror again. This time, I was sure something was off. The car wasn't just behind me anymore. It was right there, so close that I couldn't see any space between my car and theirs. But when I looked, there was nothing. No one in the lane behind me. Just the road stretching out in the dark, empty. My pulse quickened. I slowed down, then sped up again, trying to shake off the panic creeping into my chest. But the sensation only grew stronger. Something was wrong. I felt like I wasn't alone on the road anymore, even though I clearly was. My eyes darted back to the mirror. The headlights were gone, but the feeling of being followed didn't fade. It wasn't until I rounded the bend that I saw a figure in the distance, walking along the side of the road. My stomach lurched. It was strange, seeing someone out here in the middle of nowhere. There weren't any houses for miles, just fields and trees on either side. The figure was tall, their clothes blending into the dark. They didn't appear to be walking with any real purpose, just a slow, deliberate slide, and they weren't moving off to the side. They were walking right on the edge of the road. I considered driving past, pretending I hadn't seen them. But the strange thing was, the closer I got, the more I realized their back was to me. They weren't walking toward me. They weren't facing the road. They were facing the woods, walking at a steady pace like they knew no one would be around to see them. I told myself it was nothing, that it was just some person taking a late night stroll. Maybe someone who'd run out of gas or was walking to a friend's house. But when I passed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. As I drove on, the feeling of being followed crept back again. The headlights weren't in my mirror anymore, but I kept thinking I saw something on the side of the road. Just flashes of movement, like something dark was moving between the trees. I glanced over, but all I could see were the shadows, the woods stretching on forever in the dark. Then, as if it was orchestrated, a car came speeding up behind me. It wasn't just any car, it was the same car I had seen earlier. The headlights were blinding, too close, too intense. My breath caught in my throat as it came up beside me. The car was dark, no distinguishing features, just a black silhouette, too close to my window. It stayed there for a moment, pacing me, before it sped ahead of me, faster than I could react. The instant it passed, I felt a shiver run through me. It was like I could feel the presence of whoever was inside that car. I don't know why, but it was like they had been waiting for me. I pushed my foot harder on the gas, my eyes darting between the road and the rearview mirror, searching for any sign of movement. My headlights cast a long beam of light ahead, but the darkness that surrounded me felt alive, like something was lurking just beyond the reach of the light. The car kept speeding ahead, but then, to my horror, it started slowing down. It drifted back into my lane, right in front of me, as if it had no intention of letting me pass. I panicked. My hands gripped the wheel, knuckles white. I knew I had to get past, but I couldn't. I tried to swerve into the other lane, but I could barely see in the dark. My heart was hammering in my chest. I thought about pulling off the road, finding a place to stop, to gather my thoughts, but I was afraid. The thought of stopping felt like surrendering, like something bad would happen if I did. The car, still just ahead of me, stayed in the front, blocking my way. I could see the outline of the driver's side window, but no one was inside. No one. I slammed on the brakes, my tires screeching as the car seemed to disappear right in front of me, vanishing into the dark. It was like it never existed. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear the hum of the engine. I felt dizzy, breathless, my eyes locked on the road, every sense alert. For a long, terrifying minute, I didn't see a single thing. No car, no figure, no sign of life. I didn't stop until I reached home, just past dawn, and even now I can't shake the feeling that something was out there, something that wasn't meant to be seen. I can't explain what happened that night, what I saw or felt. Maybe it was my mind playing tricks on me, exhaustion, or maybe it was something else. But as I drove down that road, alone in the dark, I knew one thing for sure. I was not alone.